Sometime during October last year, I wrote a script for a video called Jagex is not doing so well, detailing a lot of the problems that the game was currently having. I was going to record a video at some point, but the fang got nerfed shortly after, so I thought maybe there is hope. Maybe they will address a lot of the problems with TOA. Maybe they'll make Nex less terrible. Maybe they'll get around to addressing the ridiculous power creep issues that have been cropping up recently. Boy, was I wrong. Half a year later, and it seems Jagex has no real intention of fixing these problems. So here's me going over most of the issues I have with old school RuneScape, in hopes that maybe Jagex can listen to not only me, but a lot of community who have voiced similar concerns. It's a bit of a complicated issue, but it basically boils down to the fact that Jagex is not willing to make any difficult decisions when there is a problem with an update. This is compounded by the new updates lacking foresight. Lastly, you have the fact that polls almost always pass, so it's like 3 different layers to the same problem. Also, yeah, I know this is somewhat bad timing considering how recent the whole Oda block and Mod Trident drama is. But I'm not going to be talking about any of that, and this is an issue that's been brewing for a really long time, ever since the release of Nex, and that was a pretty long time ago. I had written a couple paragraphs about the new prayer book, but they have since said that they are gonna scrap it, for now. I still think that they should have never proposed a new prayer book in the first place, but at least they acknowledged how bad the current one is. I mean the current Luminous prayers, obviously. Even though it got scrapped, it perfectly illustrates my point. The OSRS team came up with the new prayers that were really bad, and everybody voted yes to them, and no one realized how bad they were until they were beta tested. That's a pretty huge problem. They all passed with over 75% yes votes, and they ended up being some of the worst things ever introduced to the game. Not only did the developers design them, but they got greenlit. Every single one of them. And the only reason they're not being added is because Jagex recognized how terrible they are. Next time they want to add new prayers, it's also gonna be terrible. And it's still going to pass. It's just gonna be a repeat of what we saw with the beta. I know this because there's actually a lot of bad updates that have already been added. And yes, I know my pronunciation of certain words is leaving a lot to be desired right now. But it's early in the morning, so whatever. On the topic of bad bosses, if you go looking for an X team right now, you might not even find one. It's one of the least popular bosses in the game, but it's also the most profitable. 15 million GP per hour is not enough incentive. That's how little people want to interact with that boss. Then there's the drop table. Nex has enough drops to fill a brand new raid. It actually offers better items than Theater of Blood. That is pure insanity, and it should not be like that. If they were to remove Nex entirely, they would scale back the power creep by an incredible amount. There are almost no words to describe how terrible Nex is, both for the game and as a boss in and of itself. And the fact that it's been going unchecked since release has me quite worried. People will often defend the power creep, but I think that's completely ignorant. If you give an inch, Jagex will take a mile. Now, all of a sudden, we have Torva and Virtus, plus a new prayer book is coming at a later point. How long until people start asking for an old school RuneScape? I don't think Jagex wants that, and truth be told, you as a player don't want to be in that situation either. We are way past the slippery slope fallacy now. We are actually running out of 2010 style updates to add to the game. That's how bad it's gotten. One of the new skills was basically summoning in some weird way, and they had to write several paragraphs to explain how it's not like summoning, even though it basically is. So they want to add summoning too. So it's not good, guys. It's really bad. Another problem with power creep is the fact that Torva is a direct upgrade to Inquisitor's armor in most places. So now Fosanis Nightmare is basically dead content. You probably don't think that's a big deal, but I don't. I do quite enjoy that boss, but what are you gonna do when a raid becomes dead content? Then you're screwed. There's no recovering from that. That is something that will make people quit the game. Did you know that Theater of Blood almost died because of Nex and TOA? How much more strain can raids 1 and 2 take before they're basically dead? And for what? Why would you sacrifice some of the best PVM content in the game for a new update that's most likely not gonna surpass it? Jagex really needs to figure this out, because me and everybody else really don't want those raids to become dead content. Money is also a huge part of PVM. It might even be the biggest part, so adding content that's 10 to 15 million GP per hour or gear that devalues other gear is not such a good idea. The entire point of OSRS is that older content stays relevant. It's why this game is considered so good compared to other MMORPGs. But Jagex doesn't really care that much. They're willing to repeat the exact same mistakes that they did in 2010. Also, yes, I know there's a difference between the OSRS developers and Jagex as a company. That's probably a really big difference, because the developers want what's best for the game, but Jagex really wants to make a lot of money. So I understand the predicament, but I still have to say it like it is. No offense to the J-mods or anything. Another problem is the Osmompton's Fang. The fact that it's such a common drop and is best in slot at so many places is really compounding the issue I was just talking about. The Rapier, the Dragon Hunter Lance, Scythe, Inquisitor Mace and Armor are all affected by this one item being so cheap and powerful. Whatever benefit you're getting from the Fang is not worth all the detriments that comes with it. This is what I mean by a lack of foresight and Jagex not making any difficult decisions. These problems should be addressed, but they're not. I think back when the team was much smaller, you had 1 or 2 people responsible for dealing with these types of issues. Now you really don't see problems like these being dealt with the same way, and I think it's going to hurt the game in the long run. You also have PvP power creep. Imagine if they actually go through with the one item that gives you a 25-second freeze timer for Ice Barrage. How miserable is that? I honestly hate that idea so much. It should just also get scrapped. It's probably one of the few things that if you actually pull it, it would fail. But they didn't. They just decided on a whim that it was a good idea. I don't know if they're gonna change their mind on that item. It seems like they might, but also, since when do they care about PvP power creep? Since never is the answer to that. You also had the new skill proposals, which were all so terrible. I just don't have it in me to break it down why I hated them so much. But the fact is, none of the new skills really belong in the game, but Jagex insists on pushing it anyway, which is stupid. I don't like these fundamental changes that affect the game in such a drastic way. I don't care if it looks good on Jagex's quarterly report or whatever, it's still dumb. By the time 1 or 2 new skills gets added, all defense of quote-unquote old-school RuneScape will be gone, and I don't want that. And the OSRS developers don't want that either, but it seems like I'm the only one who wants to acknowledge the fact that we are having these problems in the first place. I still love old-school RuneScape, and I want it to last for another 10 years. The developers also love the game and want it to last 10 more years. But their actions don't really reflect that. So all I'm hoping for is that Jagex is a bit more considerate with the new updates. OSRS is a damn near perfect game in my opinion, and it's really not a lot they have to do to make it even better. Just look at a couple items and tweak them a little bit. I feel like every update has to go through 30 developers all the way to fucking Congress before it gets added to the game. Like, you can nerf the Fang ever so slightly just on a whim. It's not that big of a deal. Actually, Jagex is owned by the Carlyle Group. Maybe it does have to go through Congress after all. I know I basically spent a really long time complaining about the game, but I am a big fan of the game and of Jagex, but I think it's really important to talk about problems like these now, before they get completely out of hand, and they are well on their way to become out of hand, as seen by the last year's worth of updates.